to encourage people. I would encourage people who are continue with their commercial real estate. As I said, commercial real estate sometimes is lucrative in terms of rewards. But anyway, the home building has slowed down quite a bit already. They think they said that because of the material price gone up so much, and also the labor shortage. They said that the labor, the material cost has risen 19%, but actually it's much more than that. It's more like 33%. And also the problem is that the builders cannot find any contractor to work. They don't want to work for some reason, and they rather stay home or have some reason not coming to work. So we have the builders have difficult time getting the contractor to work. Now, however, some developer are quietly acquiring the land in this area. As you know, because land is still a scarcity in California, especially in San Gabriel Valley. There are not too much good lands to suitable for building the homes and offices. And the developers think that it's a good time to acquire land, because they figure that it will take about 2 years for planning, for entitlement, and it will take another 2 years to build. By the time the first units is to be sold on the market, it will be 4 years from now, which hopefully the economy will have returned considerably, and a good time for the develop properties to be sold. So that's what they're doing, and that's what they are betting on it. So that's one of the phenomena. That's what is happening. Anyway, the buyers are still very robust because of inflation and the appetite for real estate. As you know, that the only thing that's real is real estate, right? I mean, and it's the only hedge for the inflation. So that's why people are still buying. They want to invest their money in real estate. So that is a good thing. So it will continue to work with your client and reason with them that, hey, this is a good time to buy, and then you can get some business. Anyway, before I get to today's speakers, I would like to have to make some announcements, actually some good news to you. The first good news is that we have 27 agents who are qualified for commercial, for the Coldwell Banker Distinguished Awards. We had 22 last year, but this year we have 27. And also the dollar amount is much more than the 2020. So actually we have a very good year in 2021. 27 people are qualified for Distinguished Award, and with a much higher production. And we are going to hold the award ceremony on June the 17th in the San Gabriel Country Club. It's going to be a very good venue and also good food. So I'm really looking forward to it. Invitation has already been sent to all the qualified agents, and congratulations to those who are qualified to receive those awards. And the second good news that I want to give it to you is that now you can subscribe the AIRCRE library for $199 a year. Now, as you know, that the AIR form are much coveted and preferred by commercial real estate agents, especially for those big boys, who constantly buying commercial real estate. And so, if they give you the AIR form, and if you respond to them AIR form, they respect you more. Because the AIR form is more comprehensive, is more sophisticated, and also it's more in style. Okay, so but in order to become or to use the forms, then you have to become the member for the AIR, and you have to pay $195 a month in order to get access to their library. But if you want just to get the forms in the library, and you don't really care about the database, in which you can have a CRA, the CMA, the analysis, or the you put the listing in the AIR the database, then you can just subscribe to the AIR and CRE forms only, and that's only about $199 a year, and then they can upload it into your account and then use it together with the California Association of Realtor forms, the SIP forms, and it's very convenient, and it's exactly the same as the one that you would get from your AIR membership. So that is a very good deal. Okay, so that's the two announcements I want to make. And now it comes to the main part of our meeting. We have two very prolific keynote speakers today, Ken Lee and Nancy Luke. Now, Ken Lee is the Vice President of Pacific Premier. He is practically the right hand and the left hand of our owner and developer, James Chou. And he brought a slew of experience to our development department. He spoke to us about a few months ago on the land development, and he will continue part two of the land development today. And I'm sure that you have a lot of insight on this area. And also Nancy Luke is our CPA for the CBGR, and as well as the Pacific Premier. I have known Nancy for eons, building so many years ago. I don't know, I lost count already, Nancy, so forgive me, but it's been a long time. And she is extremely knowledgeable in tax matters, especially pertaining to real estate. And she's going to talk about the tax treatment of build to rent or build to sell. And I'm sure that she will have a lot of insight in this area. So without further ado, let's welcome Ken Lee and Nancy Luke. Ken, you're the first. Let's take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. And actually, I checked when the last time was that I joined you all. It was actually more than a year ago. So time flies by. Yeah, it was April 21st of 2021.
Wow, time flies.
Yeah, the time does fly. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. What happens is when I run a PowerPoint, just so everybody knows, is that I can't see you. So if you want to interrupt me and ask a question, feel free to go ahead and speak up and unmute yourselves and interrupt me. So I'm not sure how many of you participated last time, but I don't want to recap everything, obviously from last time, but I do want to pick up where I left off. Just a little bit more about me. So I'm Vice President of Development. I work very closely with James. If you don't know, both James, me, and Nancy are all on the south side of the building over here in Alhambra. So if you ever want to come find us, just come and knock in, and we'd be happy to talk with you even after the presentation as well. So I have a kind of a mixed background of both public sector, private consulting. I was a community development director for a short time. And initially, I actually was working with James as his consultant on land use matters, and then I moved into being in-house with them and really kind of running the day-to-day operations of the company. So let me go ahead and start the presentation. So yeah, just a recap. I want to pick up where we last left off. We introduced the company last time, explained that we're really a boutique firm. The way we're structured is that we surround ourselves with experts and professionals, and we manage our projects with a really tight-knit team. Trust within our team is really important. So a lot of the relationships we have with everything from our architects to our engineers to our contractors, these are relationships that even James has cultivated over the course of even 30 years in some cases. To Peter's point, not all contractors are active in the San Gabriel Valley market. particularly, those that we work with very regularly. There's only a handful that are based here that can do more complex projects, like podium projects and mixed use projects like what we're building right now. So I shared a little bit last time about our shop and how we are soup to nuts. We, everything from acquisition through permitting to construction, sales, leasing, and also management. So we do have a property management arm of the company called Concord Property Management. And so once we complete a project, we hand it off to the property management team and they take it from there. That's relevant also to today's conversation, because what Peter really wanted us to talk about was, the pros and cons and sort of the trade-offs of, as well as what we're seeing in the market for sale versus for rent product. And you all know, I mean, like Peter said, there's volatility certainly in the market right now from a construction standpoint. Costs you can't pin down. I mean, what we hear from the contractors is that, if they don't buy the materials today and stockpile it, it'll go up another 20% in 3 days. It's impossible to almost track. Labor hasn't been as much of an issue, at least for us. But certainly, we're having to be adaptable to what we're seeing in the market. We also shared about our projects. We've got about 9 projects that are running right now or have been completed in recent years. Those are all really located in San Gabriel Valley proper. This is just a smattering of the various projects that have been completed, under construction, or are going under entitlement right now. So we make sure we have a healthy pipeline from acquisition to entitlement, as well as construction and completion. And right now, kind of our target and our goal from a business standpoint is to have 1 project complete every year for the next possibly 10 years. And so we're actually looking at additional properties right now. Last time, really what I talked about was the basics of development. And so it was mostly a development 101 discussion, and James and I tag team on this. And we'll recall what I explained is that development is not for everyone. It's going through a meat grinder, if you remember me showing you a picture of that. And keep in mind, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and James has broad shoulders because he carries a very, very heavy load, and, personally guarantees a lot of loans. And when you have that many projects in the pipeline, that's a lot to carry. But, we talked about the process from acquisition to designing a project, how critical community engagement is. And we talked about, obviously, once you complete the project, then you have to go to occupancy and marketing as part of that, sales and leasing, and then the asset management perspective if it's a long-term hold. I think I shared last time about where we are right now, and this is fluid, right? In terms of our multifamily products, whether we're going to market for sale as condos or are we taking them to market as apartments. We all know that there's a housing shortage in California. And obviously, as prices are going up, that directly impacts for the apartment for lease market as well. And so, I mean, we're all seeing rents that we've never seen before. And this is even across the board, even when we're talking about industrial product as well. But, as we're looking at our market within the San Gabriel Valley, there's kind of 2 buckets that we look at, which is more established residential markets, which is like Alhambra, Arcadia, Monterey Park, where we have 6 projects actually. And then there's the emerging markets, the growing markets like San Gabriel, like Temple City. San Gabriel is, I mean, they are, talk about prolific.
Hello.
I talked to their building official and they could not be busier. They have so many projects that are under construction right now. That does include multifamily. But keep in mind, when you're looking at this entire San Gabriel Valley market, there isn't a huge preponderance of projects that are being built from a multifamily standpoint. You drive down the main thoroughfares and you'll see obviously smaller projects, like 8 units, 10 units, 12 units, sometimes 20, but it's not like 250 units like we see in some places in Orange County. That's important because that's an absorption question for the market. Right. And so we have to make sure that our pipeline is set up based on this market, what we know about it, what units can be absorbed, and how we strategize around that. So it's important for us, though, to be in some of these emerging markets. And the last time we did not actually have our Temple City project, so we added another project, and that's an emerging market as well. So, part of what we look at, and this is just part of a offering memorandum that we put together for a institutional investor. I'm sorry, I think somebody's not muted, but so, we look at sales comps, right? And, we're seeing sales comps that for mainly existing product, not so much a lot of new product, but, we kind of showed this one as an example that you have a condo unit in this complex built in 1974 in Temple City that obviously hasn't had a whole lot of improvements and upgrades since then. And it's sold at $574 a foot. I mean, that's mind boggling, but, when we talk about rents, and how that translates, obviously there's kind of primary markets like Pasadena. We're more of a sub-market, right? And so, but, you look at like the 88 at Alhambra Place, and if that's a benchmark because of the amenities that it provides in the project, but also in the surrounding areas, because that really is downtown Alhambra, that provides a premium location. And we're seeing their rents increase as we speak. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But we are looking at, historical and where trends are going in terms of sales prices versus rent. And you can see here in that brown line that there is a very healthy increase over time in rents. And, again, that 88 project, if you've never been there, I encourage you to go actually take a tour of it. It was built by Shea Properties based in Aliso Viejo. That company does everything from multifamily, hospitality, industrial to every other product type in between. But this was a big redevelopment project of Alhambra Place where they essentially upgraded the retail portions of that shopping center where Sprouts, Burlington, et cetera, is just down the street from here. And then they built 200 something units. I forgot the total count, which is 88 Alhambra Place. I did actually walk through that project. It was well built. It was well designed. What I noticed is that it's highly amenitized. And so you have, this is a large pool that you're talking about. This picture really doesn't do it justice, but if you look at it actually in person, from a scale standpoint, it's a large courtyard, large pool. They have barbecues. They've got a lot of indoor amenities as well. They've got private karaoke rooms, game rooms, office space that you can use as well. This is important because when you're talking about a market and you need to be able to command higher rents, you have to provide those amenities. And this is something that we're actively looking at ourselves. And so these are just some of the examples of some of the amenities, and we were just talking about this actually in our office as far as a dog park, right? And so when you have folks that live in kind of medium, mid-rise to high-rise buildings, they don't want to take their dogs and go all the way down to the ground floor and go find a spot for them to pee, right? And so the dog runs that are built into some of these projects can be a really important amenity as well. So what does that mean in terms of rents? Well, I took screenshots just last night from their website. And I don't know if you've been tracking, but their studio is renting at almost $3,000 for 575 square feet. And depending on location and proximity to the courtyard or amenities, even their one bedroom, you see this last one, and I'm just like mind blown, right? That they're charging $3,500 for a one bedroom unit. And when you go on their website, they list all of their available units. There's like maybe 4, 5. And so they're fairly leased up on a regular basis, and they're just regularly doing turnover, but they're constantly leasing. And so, their 2 bedrooms are running almost close to what their 1 bedrooms are at $3,600. But depending on location, again, they did show me 1 unit. And when it says call for details, you have to wonder if that's going to blow your mind as well. So this is important because we have a project that's directly across the street, which is Monterey Bay Square. And this project kind of bookends the Alhambra Place Shopping Center. If you think about creating a block or a square, with that big parking lot in between. We have 62 units. This is very high-end kind of luxury units. This was originally intended for condo. And so what Nancy is going to talk about is the implications from a tax perspective of for sale versus for rent. And this is important because when we create these projects, we invite investors to become limited partners in the project. And they have to have a very consistent strategy in terms of short-term versus long-term. Are you going to sell? Are you getting out? Are you exiting? Or are you going to hold long-term, improve the cap rate and get out later? Or it could be a long-term hold for 20, 30 years. But when we talk about amenities on for sale versus for rent, that's extremely relevant. And so kind of the tale of the two projects I want to show you is that what you're seeing in the bottom right is that we do have residential courtyards, we have amenities, but it's not as highly amenitized as like what you're seeing at 88 at Alhambra Place. And there's a reason, because when we spec these projects out as condo, what's really important for us from an affordability standpoint for homeowners, because depending on the projects, they're not always going to be luxury product. And so if we're looking for entry level, we have to make sure that the HOA dues are set at a reasonable rate. And we go through an entire process, as some of you probably know, in working through the DRE process, but we pull in a firm that actually creates our HOA budget, and we value engineer that until it gets to a dues rate that we believe the market can bear. And that's very important to James, because he continuously does not want to have high HOA dues. But what that means is if you're value engineering down your dues, you can't over amenitize your project, because ultimately that's an operations and maintenance issue for the HOA. So when you're already under construction and you're heading toward, I'm just going to show you guys a whole series of pictures and get through this and then hand over to Nancy. But when you're already kind of going through construction and you've based your project, sized your budget, everything around the condo project, that's important, because we're now pivoting because of what we're seeing in the market and how healthy the rental market is. But that's not that easy to do. And so when we look at our rents in the future for this project, while we have comps that are obviously directly across the street, we don't have the same level of amenities, and we have to recognize that as well. Now, we do have some unique aspects to this project, because the top 2 floors are, which you don't see here because they're not yet built, but they're under construction right now in more recent pictures. Those are penthouse units. So it's actually, they have a loft, and they also have a rooftop kind of garden area in terms of a patio on the rooftop deck. So, but again, as we're kind of going through construction, it's difficult to pivot midstream on a project. And this is just, kind of what we're doing right now. There's a parking structure that we're building that's attached to this as well. And so again, when we look at the courtyard deck, et cetera, it's already set because we've already gone through plan check, we've got our permit. We would have to go back to the city and change our plans if we were going to make any improvements or upgrades to any of the areas. So, there's a context for sale versus for rent. This is a different project. This is our biggest project. It's almost 6 acres. Many of you know the San Gabriel Nursery. This was the growing grounds for their wholesale operations back then, which they didn't want to do anymore in terms of the 3rd generation of the Yoshimura family who runs the nursery. So I went on the market back in 2016. And so we were able to secure the property. It's taken many years, 5 years total, to get through entitlements. We're in plan check right now. So this is the time for us to be looking at for sale versus for rent, and not wait until we're under construction, because we have to make these decisions today about whether what level of amenities we intend to provide. This is particularly important because this is a pretty big project. It's 251 units, over 70,000 square feet of retail. You're not seeing the upper floors here. You'll see it in a second. But what you'll notice is that it's not just one massive super block. We have the Central Park feature and Central Plaza area that is a key amenity for the retail and the residents that's being planned. and actually actively being designed right now. So we have, these are really conceptual designs when we talk about the Central Park. These are all set. So these are anticipated elevations for the project, but you'll notice that we have a lot of design features that you can say are amenitizing the project, but this is really the key here when we talk about the Central Park. So this is a placemaking question for the retail side, but it also does directly impact this whole discussion around for sale versus for rent, because you're not going to over amenitize something if it's not affordable from an operations and maintenance standpoint. So we have to be actually establishing our budgets today around this. And so we're working with a consulting team to address those things. But you'll notice that when we talk about the Central Park area, how we design it is going to be really critical. And so, you know, the other real aspect of this, when we talk about absorption of units into the market, is that, you know, we're not going to take 251 apartments to the market all at the same time. And so between the two buildings, it's actually split between 106 units on the north side and 247, I think, units on the south side. I'm sorry, 147 on the south side. So it's a whole total of 251. I probably got my math wrong, but that's okay. But there will be a gap between these two buildings of 6 months. One, because, you know, it's important from a construction staging standpoint, but two, it allows us to take 106 units to the market first, and then take the next phase on the second go around. And so, you know, there's some other aspects of this project as far as public art that was really important. But, you know, this is actually the real question, because right now, just yesterday, we had a design study session with our landscape architect, because this was very conceptual when we took it to entitlements. This is what we showed the Planning Commission, City Council, and Design Review Commission. But now we're talking about, well, if these are apartments, then what do tenants want? If you want to get higher rents, what do you have to provide them? We've talked about everything. James doesn't know this, but the landscape architect goes, you guys want to put a pool in, right? I mean, there's a lot of discussion around how we amenitize the area, because if you're going to create these courtyards, you want them to be used. You don't want them to be just dead areas and dead space. And so we've actually just talked about putting a dog run in. So this is not the current design, but this is the other 800 building, which is a larger one. But when you think about these areas, I mean, this is such a large area. This is like, I think, over 30,000 square feet of just open space. That's a park. It's a neighborhood park. So we also have to think about the cost of maintaining a park, much like a city has to pay to maintain a park as well, or an HOA. So this is complicated. I'm not going to go through this. What I'm explaining to you right now is this is where we are right now, that red line, because we're currently trying to get to permit. So we have to coordinate across 12 different disciplines, architects, landscape architects, lighting designers, civil engineers, structural engineers, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers. You change one thing, it affects everything else. And so when we talk about these amenities and we talk about for sale versus for rent, these are all things that we're actively having to work through right now. So I talked really fast. I went through a lot. You know, I'm available for questions, obviously, but I want to hand it over to Nancy, because what she has to share is very, very important, because yes, we do need to consider, obviously, what's happening in the market, what our goal is for the project, but the investment group, the ownership group, is ultimately the one that needs to really decide strategically, short-term, long-term, what are their financial goals and economic goals for the project. If they're looking to exit, right, then what does that mean? But more importantly, what are the tax implications for them? And so that's a really important aspect that we've had a lot of discussion around very recently. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Nancy, unless there's any interim questions in between. Okay.
Ken, yeah, this it's very interesting that you have so many big projects, and I know that's very intricate to deal with the city. But some of the plans that you have already made was a few years back before the COVID-19, right? For example, for the St. Gabriel project, you have all the plans and amenities and already set. And it, because of the COVID, do you have to do some modifications in order to fit into the situation?
Yeah, I didn't really focus on that piece as much, but considering that we have commercial agents and brokers here, that's actually very, very relevant. And so we had an internal discussion with our design team about COVID, its impact, particularly on retail. And what does that mean? I mean, when we were going to hearings or even just info sessions with anything from the historical commission to design review, they were all asking the same thing. Are you really going to have a gym at this project? Right? Really? COVID gyms?
Yeah,
Does it go? Right? Well, you know, it was an important question because we also had to have a backup plan. But more importantly, when we talk about the retail elements that are facing the street, what we don't want to do is actually what's at Alhambra Place. And so Alhambra Place really has no outdoor areas. They've got some tables that are facing actually away from the street toward the parking lot. It doesn't engage the street also, but more importantly, they don't have a lot of open air seating other than Big Catch. If you've seen what Big Catch has done, they've got that back patio area that's next to the bar. And by the way, they have a really great bar. But that back patio area has these folding doors that open up. And so it creates an indoor-outdoor environment and enhanced patio area. That's actually what we are planning to do here. We didn't have to make wholesale changes to the project because structurally, you have the columns and everything holding up the concrete, right, podium deck. All we have to do is push back the front fenestration, basically the glass walls and windows and doors, et cetera, push it back, and we just create a bigger balance between indoor outdoor. And so we've had that design discussion, and that's an active goal, regardless of whether COVID gets completely better or not. You don't know about future pandemics, and we're in Southern California. So let's take advantage of our indoor outdoor areas as well.
Good point. Thank you.
Hi, Ken. This is Tomas.
Hi, Tomas.
Yeah, I know you share about the 88 in Alhambra. Are you aware also of the project? It's called the Celadon on Garfield and Garvey across the B of A?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That one. The reason I want to bring this up is because they are building. It's going to be a mixed use, and they have a lot of amenities. And also key to it is that they are also going to be for lease. More than 121 units will be basically for lease.
Right.
The other thing too is that they're going to have the gym. They're going to bring Italian restaurant. And things like that. Those are the things that are very. Those are things that are happening in Monterey Park. We want to bring different brands to it to the city. So I just wanted to share that since you shared the 88 in Alhambra.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm very aware of that property. I really am hoping to God that that project gets completed because that property, as you all know, everybody's driven by it.
Forever.
Yeah. And
at one time, George Realty had the contract to, but that was many years back.
Yeah. So. That's the point. Many years, not just years, it's been decades. And so I'm hopeful that they're going to finally proceed with that project.
Okay, good.
Peter, I do want to leave enough time for Nancy.
Yeah, right.
And I'm going to have to sign off at 12 for a HOA board meeting. So.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much. Nancy.
Okay, my topics, it can be very simple. It can be long, it can be very long, it can be short. Okay. Since Ken's already talking about the land and commercial property, so and Peter assigned me, I need to talk about this building is going to be rent or going to be sell. So that we need to know the tax consequences. Well, you have to decide, are you an investor or are you a developer? If you are an investor, you're going to get a capital gain, which is a 23.8%. If you are like James Chou, that's a developer. So you are a developer, then that is all the condo, the houses you have, that is the inventory. So it's going to be an ordinary income. So for that standpoint, so RS, how do you everybody say I want to be investor? So easy said than done. But you have to first start with the intention. What is your intention? If your intention, I want to buy a small little piece of land, develop maybe 3 or 4 units, fine, that will be probably okay. But if you try to be like James Chou building like 150, 200 units of a condo, there's no way you can say, I'm an investor, because you are selling inventory. So very easy, so very simple decision is that, are you going to sell or are you going to rent? So if you're going to sell it, it's going to be ordinary income, which is going up to like 37%, which you talk about 15% gap there. So if you want to rent, the rent and which is, you can, if you have a rent, yeah, nowadays, like I can say, it's a very good market nowadays. So that you can get very good rental income, and vacancy is very low. And that's why it's also we talk about the ADA and all those amenity. James Chou's project is practical, because if you take a look at where Pacific Villa Place in the Huntington Drive there is, let's say 1 bedroom, we have a 2 bedroom, we have they're building as a suite. So that means 2 people can sharing the 1 room. If you talk about $3,000 a month rental, how much you have to make in order to be afford to live in that place? So very often you have 2 people sharing the suite, like 300, 1,000 square feet, 2 bedroom, 2.5 bath. So each one of them, they can probably pay $1,500 to share the same condo. I think that made more sense. So it depends on how do you design, how do you really look at them. So that means that most, easy, then people look at, oh, that's a great amenity, but sometimes it's very difficult to do so. So as a father, so the investor, that will be, I think in this commercial, mostly is rent. For the real estate agent, you can, rent, you also can getting the commission too. So this is, you talk about the tax consequence, could be simple, could be difficult. And like James' situation, some of the investor, when they invest in those property, and those are condo are separate grant or separate deeded. So some of the investor, they're using their investment to put the separate, maybe let's say I keep a 2-3 condo under my own name, I will rent it out. So I probably, hopefully, eventually converting from those ordinary income as a developer into as an investor, for your rental, maybe holding at least 5-6 years down the road. Then you probably gradually converting from a developer into as of investor. So right now we are working on some of the project. We're working with the attorney to put the separate grantee, separate deeded to some of the LLC, to whoever, how many units they want to buy, they want to keep it, or they can refinance it, all the property themselves. So convert it themselves into the, so that beginning we start with a developer, but eventually, gradually, we grant a deed to the separate investor, and they can do whatever they want with their own property. So that is a talk about this one. And the second topic I'm going to talk about is how we're going to what is the best way to holding the title of the real property. Most of people talk about joint tenants with right of survivorship. Another is a community property with right of survivorship. Of course, mostly we talk about the living trust. So does anyone know what's the difference between a joint tenant and community property? Anyone knows? Because of both of them, they're all the same. The first die, the second one, well, let's say a surviving spouse, they have the right to inherit this property. So joint tenant and community at the same result. They're all the same. But why some people using joint tenant and some people use a community property? But that's the tax consequence different is if you are joint tenant, let's go back. When we die, the property gonna reappraise to the date of death value. So let's say if a joint tenant, only the decedent can receive the step-up basis. The surviving spouse is still remain the same. you cannot receive step-up basis. But if you have a community property, both of the people, they will receive a step-up basis. That is the reason most people were using the community property with right of the survivorship. Because let's say if you joint tenant, this original you buy maybe many years ago, $200,000. Each one of you have $100,000 of cost. There's one of them die and their death values become $1 million. So if a joint tenant, only decedent, that part will receive step-up basis. No, $500,000 plus $100,000. That's a $600,000. That's a new basis at the first death. And if you are community property and your new basis will become $1 million. So you can tell the difference between $600,000 versus $1 million. That is become your new basis. If you talk about selling or rental, that's a completely different ballgame. But however, the problem with this title holding is that after the first death, the surviving spouse, very often you have to determine who is going to inherit this property after the second death. Because the reason you go probate, because the court does not know who's going to inherit this property. This is going to happen on the second death. That is the reason most people don't want to using the either joint tenant or community property. They're going to go back use a living trust. On your living trust, you will tell who's going to inherit. First death, second death, you will continue to have people able to inherit that property. So that is the reason if you know your client who under joint tenant or community property, recommend them using the living trust. Some people say, well, I don't want to spend the money, whatever. It's the money well spent, believe me. So, okay, another way we look at talk about it is we talk about some people buying rental property. And mostly a lot of time we tell them, okay, invest it in the under the name of LLC, limited liability company. Okay, you have to understand for the federal law, limited LLC, that means a partnership. The definition of the partnership is a need to 2 or more people. So if you have a husband, wife, you can treat it as a 1 person, or you can treat it as a 2 person. So in California, we also have a single member LLC. It's only 1 person. It could be husband or wife. So that means that if you are the partnership, you need to file the federal tax return. But if you're a single member LLC, for the federal, you're not called partnership. So therefore, you're not required to file the federal return, but you need to file the California to tell them what you paid your taxes, plus whatever the gross receipts fee. So it's rather than you prepare need about 2-3 tax return, you only all the rental income expense report under your individual tax return. So that is a less return to file is better. So that is a thing. Then a lot of people say, how come you want to use an LLC to holding those property, your rental property? Because LLC, they have a charging order. So probably quite a few people don't understand what is a charging order. Charging order means, let me see, take a look at the charging order here. Let me see. Charging order, they have 2 rights. One is transferable rights, which is an economic right. Another right, you have a management of voting right. So let's say the reason you use an LLC, you want to limit your liability. You don't want the creditor to suing you. So that means you have a charging order. So whoever is suing you, then if you have a charging order, you can take my economic right, which is transferable. But you have another right, which is a voting and management. That is not transferable. So if a creditor suing the LLC member, they only can sue in, they can have a lien on the economic transferable interest, but they don't have a right to the other right, which is a management and voting. So that's the reason most people creditor, when they face such a situation, since you have an economic interest, I can give you the K1 for you to report the income taxes, but you don't have a management or voting right. So that means as long as I'm not distributing money to me, you cannot access to my money to the LLC. So that is the reason if a creditor is suing you, you can have all the taxes to pay, but you don't have a cash to distribute it to you. So there's a reason most people or creditor does not going to go through this route to pursue for the LLC interest because they can't get anything out of you. So that is the reason, not only that they limit the liability, because this is a very powerful asset protection planning idea. So that means the creditor usually they leave you alone. They're not going to doing it because they don't have the right to manage. They don't have a right to make a decision to distribute money or not. So that is but then what happened? Limited liability. Some people use an S corporation holding the real estate. That's a corporation also have a limited liability. The difference between the corporation and the LLC is the corporation does not have a charging order protection. Because when you sue the shareholder of the corporation, all the rights along vested with the right as being the shareholder of the shares, they can participate in the management. So they can say they coming in to vote you out and liquidate the property and you got nothing. So that is the reason real estate usually you want to hold under LLC because they cannot access to it. And I think this is a very powerful tool. And I think if you can advise your client to do this and you add a lot of value to your service, which you provide to your client. So I believe this is a very, you know the reason using LLC, but now you know why. And I think that's really a powerful tool to do so. See, my talk can be very short. Anybody, any question?
That's very good insight, Nancy, to differentiate between the LLC and the corporation. You know, the charging order, that's very good. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people know use LLC, but they don't know why.
Yeah.
You know, so so they have a lien to the property, but they cannot levy it.
Yeah. Now, if they have, they get execution order to lien on the bank account, can they get the money in the bank account?
No, they can't. They can't. Well, as long you're not as long the money go to you, let's say you take the money out for the LLC, they can access to it. But as long as you keep the money inside the LLC, they cannot touch it.
Yeah, right. Okay. Good point.
Nancy, this is Dora.
Hi, Dora.
Hi. You also mentioned about advise the client to do a living trust is well spent. Can you explain why?
Well, you know, remember we mentioned if you're using a joint tenant or community property, right, a survivorship. But what happened to the second death? Who's going to inherit property? Nobody. You don't know because the grantee only protect up to the second person, and after the surviving spouse die, who is going to inherit property? We don't know. And then you have to go to probate. If you have a living trust, on the living trust was spelled out what happened to the first death, what happened to the second death, what happened to afterward. So you can tell who's going to inherit. So that's the reason living trust whenever it does not require to go to the probate. Because on your trust, you really tell them what to do.
Thank you, Nancy.
You are.
Nancy, I have another question regarding for investor versus developer. Now, how long does it take you to change the status from developer into an investor?
Well, I read somewhere usually about 5 years or more.
5 years. So you have to file the intent of that.
Well, you have to show the intent.
What?
You know, you keep it for 5-6 years. So your intention it is for the for the investment for rental.
Okay.
You're not just you buy in a couple of years and you sell it.
Right. So 5 years like a bona fide intention.
Well, everything is that the tax law sometimes is very vague. in those areas. But most of the time, people say if you hold it for 5 years or more, usually you will be, you know.
Yeah.
I will not say home free, but at least you have your intention to keep it for investment purpose.
Yeah, well, it's also good for developers who at the time after they finish the project, it's not a good time to sell. They can hold it and then rent it out for 5 years and wait until the a good time to sell. You know, 5 years down the road.
Well, sometimes it's hard to say because you know, like James Chou, you know, like Ken mentioned that James Chou's the shoulders, the burden is very heavy. After you complete it, you have to find the money to pay for the construction loan.
Yeah.
Right? If you only rent, where are you going to get a construction loan? How do you pay off the construction loan? So easy said than done. So a lot of time it's a very complicated area. It's not easy. So a lot of people, I have seen a lot of people, they buying a piece of land, they want to develop. Either they cannot get the construction loan because they don't have experience or they don't have a financial means. So there's a lot of reason behind it. And so after you've done that, so you want to sell, you want to rent, how do you pay out the construction loan? So sometimes it's not easy. It's just a lot of decision, lots of area you need to consider.
The relationship with the banks is the most critical thing. And so if you know that you're doing a for rent apartment project, then you're setting it up strategically from the beginning for a construction loan and a takeout loan after that to pay off the construction loan and convert it into a permanent loan.
Yeah.
But you have to have a bank that trusts you.
Right. Jim probably can tell you, a lot of time that people, the people want only, they make sure James Chou is responsible for it. So, because they know him, he can deliver. It's not everyone can, even it's nothing, sometimes it's nothing to do with the money you have, even though you have the money, but the thing they say, if you don't have experience, the bank doesn't want to start with the property,
Right. Yeah, it's very important.
Ken, is there a possibility you guys will be doing half rental, half of the whole project rental and the other half for sale?
For that St. Gabriel project, I mean, we did this.
No, for the one in Monterey Park.
No, for the Monterey. So that's actually an interesting question because you have to make sure that you're creating separate lots then. And that for Monterey Park, no, it'll either all be for sale or all rental. But for St. Gabriel, where we have two separate buildings, two separate permits, two separate lots, that is a possibility. But again, it really comes down to the longer term strategy of the investors.
Okay.
Ken, this is Dora again.
Dora.
You understand that each city has a different RENA numbers. And how do you anticipate about the affordability in terms of St. Gabriel Valley as a developers?
That's like a whole nother meeting. So for those that don't know, RENA means Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Every city gets an allocation. Monterey Park got one, Alhambra got one. The whole point is that the cities are supposed to plan for that number of units to get built. And so they have to zone for that, which means that typically they're upzoning properties to allow for higher density residential. How that affects affordability is also important because the zoning is supposed to be related to the affordability levels. And so you're talking about everything from very low income to moderate income to above moderate. So it's an entire spectrum of housing that the cities are supposed to plan for. But affordable housing, let's say, is deed restricted affordable housing. The only way to accomplish that is to bring in for-profit or nonprofit affordable housing developers. We're market rate developers, but there are plenty of top-notch affordable housing developers that are starting to do projects, but they're very, very complicated, difficult. As land values go up, that makes it the gap that these developers have to fill to be able to make these projects pencil that much more difficult. And they have to cobble together sometimes 10 different funding sources, everything from tax credit allocations to other grants. And that if one piece of that falls apart, the whole thing falls apart. And so that's very difficult. There's two projects that the city of Alhambra has been pushing that are both with affordable housing developers. My understanding, and I have to verify this, is that both projects did not receive the tax credit allocation selection from the committee up at the state. That instantly just put that project on ice for probably more than a year. And so it's complicated, it's difficult. If you guys ever want to have a separate session on affordable housing, we can do that. But yeah, it's a good question, Dora.
Ken, talking about that, the affordability, that was the question that was brought up in the one of the city council meeting for the Celadon project. And guess what? They don't have any percentage for affordable housing. It's all luxury apartments.
Right. So
because it is, yeah, either whether you go, because that's going to throw away all the numbers for the developer. It's not as easy as
it's not that easy. Yeah. And to your point, it depends on the city. Some cities have ordinances that require you to either include in your project a certain percentage of affordable units at different affordability levels, or you pay a fee in lieu of that. And those fees are calculated based on a certain formula, and that varies. Peter, I have another meeting I have to jump.
Yeah, okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm the host and I'm recording, so.
That's okay, Ken. Thank you so much for coming to share your thoughts with us. It's very, very educational and inspirational. So yeah, we'll see you next time. Well, if you decide to host another affordable housing, I'll be glad to have you again.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay.
I'm going to stop recording, actually. Is that okay, Peter?
Yeah, that's fine. That's
okay.
Fine.